Welcome to Justice Trek. My name is Ted Kilvington, and this is an audio and video log that journeys through comic book history as I discuss individual comic book stories of Star Trek, the Justice Society, and the world's greatest superheroes, the Justice League of America. Justice Trek is the only show devoted to the entirety of these great comic book series. From the 1940 debut of the JSA, the launch of the JLA and Star Trek comic books in the 1960s, and right up to comics hot off today's shelves. This show will impact you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, I'm Ted Kilvington. Welcome to Justice Trek. On today's episode, number 21, we will cover not one, not two. Two. We'll cover two comics from the recent past. We're going to cover 2022's Justice Society of America number 1. And we're going to cover 2022's Stargirl, The Lost Children, number 1. Now, both of these comics are spinning out of the 2022 one-shot titled The New Golden Age number 1, which I covered in episode 15. Other episodes we have available for your viewing pleasure include episode 19, where I covered the reverse spells of Zatanna's magic from 1978's Justice League of America number 161, the issue where Zatanna joins the Justice League. We also have issue number 20, where I covered IDW's Star Trek number 1 from 2022. As the mission statement goes from the opening credits, we plan on covering not only classic comics, but also current comics. And while we've been focusing mostly on the classic comics, now we're going to, for the next couple episodes, for both Trek and Justice Society, we'll be focusing on recent comics. Pardon me while I adjust the camera a bit. Oh, yeah, it's one of the challenges of doing this show is I'm the producer, the star, the writer, the director, the editor, the lighting technician, the cameraman. It's all me, folks. So, hope you appreciate the effort, and I definitely thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to spend it with me. I know you've got an infinite number of choices, so I'm flattered that you choose to spend a fraction of your life with me. So, first time I read both of these comics was when they were published at the end of 2022. I just have the one copy of each story, the ones I just showed you. Now, some a little more background information before we really dive deep into our first comic. As I mentioned, the setup for both of these comics was in 2022's The New Golden Age number 1. I'm not going to go into too much about it, but it basically that set up the two main plots, which is to say someone's killing the Justice Society throughout time, and several classic DC sidekicks have gone missing, and no one can remember them, primarily because they never existed. So we'll get into that more. So for our don't know why the camera insists on being off center. So for our Justice Society story, our cast of characters include, in order of appearance, Batman, Bruce Wayne, Catwoman, Selina Kyle, Huntress, Helena Wayne, Solomon Grundy, Red Lantern, Ruby Sokov, The Mist, Jack Knight, Power Woman, Kara Zor-El, aka Karen Starr, Gentleman Ghost, Jim Craddock, the Harlequin's son, Michael Maine, Icicle, Cameron Machkent, Green Lantern, Alan Scott, Red Lantern, Vladimir Sokov, Starman, Ted Knight, The Mist, Kyle Nimbus. Our Man, Rex Tyler. Icicle, Jor Ma Kent. Dr. Fate, Kent Nelson. Baby, Charles Dickles. The Harlequin, Molly Main. And Wonder Woman, Princess Diana of Themyscira. But I'm not done. I got a lot more. Adam, Al Pratt. Dr. Midnight, Dr. Charles McNider. Flash, Jay Garrick. Hawkman, Carter Hall. Johnny Thunder, John L. Thunder. Hawkgirl, Shira Sanders. Degaton, Per Degaton. Yes, his real last name is Degaton, but he calls himself Degaton. Everyone calls him Degaton. He actually has a first name of Per. I have often wondered if Per is short for Percy or Percival, but I don't believe they've ever actually said. If I had a last name that rhymed with Megaton and I was a villain, I think I would just stick with the last name also. Next, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Stargirl, Courtney Whitmore. Flash, Barry Allen. Spectre, Jim Corrigan. Superman, Kal-El, a.k.a. Clark Kent. Wildcat, Ted Grant. Wait, didn't I already do him? I did not. The Butler, Alfred Pennyworth. Yeah, he doesn't have an identity. A secret identity. He's always Alfred Pennyworth, but everyone else got two names, so he's the Butler. Robin, Richard Grayson. The Boom, Judy Garrick. Star Spangled Kid, Sylvester Pemberton III. Okay, let's see if that helps the camera angle. Okay, Justice Society of America #1 was published November 29th, 2022 with a $3.99 cover price. The New Golden Age, Chapter 1, Legends Die Together 2. 20 pages. Jeff Johns, writer. Mikkel Janin, pencil and ink artist. Jordi Belair, color artist. Jerry Ordway, Scott Collins, Steve Lieber, and Brandon Peterson, guest pencil and ink artists. John Kalish, Jordan Boyd, and Brandon Peterson, guest color artists. Rob Lee Lederer, Marquis Draper, associate editor. Andrew Marino, editor. And Katie Kubert, senior editor. 31 years ago, Bruce Wayne's parents were murdered. 13 years ago, Selina Kyle became the Catwoman. 1 year from the present day, Helena Wayne will be born. 26 years from now, after her father will have been murdered, Helena Wayne, as the Huntress, and her teammate Solomon Grundy will interrogate a crook named Falcone to gain information about her father's murder. Not only will she learn that Falcone does not have the information she will be looking for, her later meeting with Dr. Fate will be aborted when she finds his blood at the place they were to have met. The Huntress instead will meet with Ruby Sokov, the Red Lantern, daughter of the original Red Lantern, to discuss what will have happened. Unbeknownst to both Huntress and Red Lantern, they will be watched by Catwoman. Later, Huntress and the Red Lantern will meet with other members of the Justice Society of America of that year. A couple days after that meeting, the JSA will be at a museum investigating the death of the Khalid Nassour Dr. Fate of that time. Suddenly, Degaton will appear and start killing the members. Catwoman will interfere before he will be able to kill the Huntress, and instead, Helena will be sent back in time to the JSA meeting room of 1940, where she will meet Johnny Thunder and his Thunderbolt. The primary cover was by Mikkel Janin, pencil, ink, and colors. It shows the Huntress standing in the ruins of the JSA meeting room, while behind her are symbolic images of Our Man, Sandman, Batman, Hawkgirl, Hawkman, Flash, and Green Lantern. I like this cover because it's a good symbolism of the story inside. Variant cover A was a cardstock version by Yannick Paquette, a decent image of Green Lantern Alan Scott. Variant cover B was a cardstock version by Jerry Ordway, showing many team members racing towards the reader against a yellow background. I love Jerry Ordway's art, and I love this image. It's very much an homage to other comics of the past, with the team of heroes racing towards the reader. Perhaps the most common one that I can think of is from a 1975 issue of Limited Collector's Edition. Hold on, let me grab it for you. Limited Collector's Edition, number C46, don't know where they came up with that crazy numbering, is one of those, again, with showing the heroes all racing towards the reader, or the camera, as some people would say. The front cover, since it's a Justice League comic, featured the Justice League of America. The back cover, however, features the Justice Society of America. Now, this is an interesting image because the two teams parallel each other. So both teams have Superman at the top, Batman at the bottom, Hawkman just to one side of Batman. But since Aquaman and Dr. Fate did not have counterparts in the other team, that they're switching out for each other. Similarly, Wonder Woman's in the same spot on both covers. Green Lantern's in the same spot on both covers. And we've also got Green Arrow swapping out for Dr. Midnight. And of course, both Flashes are in the same position. So Jerry Ordway's cover evokes this one. Variant cover C was a gold foil embossed cardstock version by Joe Quinones using 1990s trade dress. The art on this was good, but it's hard to make out because of the foil. Plus, we don't get any color other than gold. Now, this actually was part of a special gimmick DC was using on many comics they published that month, doing the throwback versions with 90s trade dress. I mean, basically, for whatever reason, they think, hey, comic fans of today would love some trade dress from 30 years ago. And they're probably right. Whether or not they're willing to pay for it is another question. Variant cover D was a cardstock version by Steve Lieber. As an old school fan, I just love these full color covers by old school artists. Variant cover E was a foil version of the Variant D cover. Variant cover F was a cardstock version by Rose Besh. This is a cute version done in an anime style. The Syndicate exclusive variant cover A was by Nathan Zerdi, pencil, ink, and color art. This is a Virgin version showing only Power Girl against an open sky background. A pleasant enough image. The Syndicate exclusive variant cover B was by Nathan Zerdi, pencil, ink, and color art. This is another Power Girl Virgin version. Same image, however, a slightly different pose, and tattoos of JSA members all over her arms. And finally, the Syndicate exclusive variant cover C was also by Nathan Zerdi, pencil, inks, and colors. This is the exact same image as Syndicate variant B, only this time there is no background. And is it just me, or does this face look like Cameron Diaz? Now, just like in the prequel to this issue, New Golden Age #1, this issue had a variety of artists without giving a breakdown of who did what. There is a full-page image of Solomon Grundy holding Falcone upside down, and the swamp creature looks very well defined. Contrast that with the following page, where we see Grundy and Huntress only as white silhouettes. The detail on one page, followed by the severe sparseness of the image on the next page, suggests different artists, but it's weird having different pencil artists on the same sequence. The members of the JSA in the Huntress's time will be her, Red Lantern, Power Woman, The Mist, Solomon Grundy, Gentleman Ghost, the Harlequin Sun, and the Icicle. And boy, it was a pain writing up the synopsis and notes, trying to do like future tense and future past tense, and boy, it makes me yearn for the days when the entire comic was set in the current. I could just use present tense. There are some good descriptions of the new team members. These, I believe, were by either the Huntress or Red Lantern. There's Jim Craddock, the Gentleman Ghost, a centuries-old spirit of a highwayman, robber, and one-time enemy of the Hawks. Solomon Grundy, the King of the Zombies. Michael Maine, the Harlequin Sun. Power Girl found over $10 million in cash in his quarters yesterday. he swears it belongs to him. So apparently this criminal not only was allowed to be on the team, but they also allowed him to live in their headquarters, provided housing for him, and they also allow him to stash his loot there. Not exactly heroic. Next up, we have Cameron Ma Kent, the Icicle. Cameron was the oldest child of the first Icicle, Jor Ma Kent. Cameron served 9 years for manslaughter after killing Ragdoll's son during a robbery gone wrong. Once again, not too heroic. Kyle Knight, the Mist. Knight is the newest to the team, but he clearly has a tie to his mother's biological family. We hope it is simply physical. Now, this ties into the James Robinson Starman series of the 90s, wherein the Mist's daughter had a son with Starman's daughter, who was the Starman at the time. So in other words, the original Mist had a son had a daughter, and the original Starman had a son named Jack Knight, and Jack Knight was the Starman of the 90s. And the original Mist's daughter had a child with Jack Knight, and apparently that child is Kyle Knight. Now, it's actually not a bad name, Knight and Mist, but it's talks about his mother's biological family. So this, now this one I would definitely like, having the mixture of a heroic family and a villainous family, all in the same person. Finally, we have Ruby Sokov, daughter of Vladimir Sokov, the Red Lantern, and longtime enemy of Alan Scott. She's a living red power ring fueled by the mystic and violent Crimson Flame. So just as Alan Scott's daughter, Jade, is a living Green Lantern power ring, so apparently the Red Lantern's daughter is a living red power ring. Out of all the new JSA members, only the new Mist, the new Red Lantern, and the Harlequin Sun are making their first appearances in this issue. Although the Harlequin Sun did not appear in the story for the new Golden Age #1, but he did get a who's who page in the back. Power Girl will be very upset about having a team that will be composed of both former JSA enemies and or the children of former JSA enemies, and I do not blame her. Now, in the middle of the JSA meeting, there is a page of TV flashbacks, which look like they were penciled and inked by Jerry Ordway. Their narration over the flashbacks were commentators echoing the same complaints that Power Girl had. Later, when the JSA of 26 years from now will be at the museum investigating Khalid's death, Daguerreotypes will kill Power Woman by artificially exposing her to kryptonite radiation for weeks instead of seconds, and then shooting her. Daguerreotypes will use his time power to reverse the Gentleman Ghost's death and restore him to life, and then shoot him to death as well. Daguerreotypes will speed up time so that Solomon Grundy decomposes within seconds. Daguerreotypes will reverse time to unheal the wounds the Harlequin Sun will have sustained during a battle with Wildcat, and then Michael will bleed out. Daguerreotypes will freeze the icicle in time and then shatter him. And finally, Daguerreotypes will age the Mist until he dies. Obviously, he was trying to mix it up, but he could just as easily have done that to more than one of the characters. Even Power Girl, eventually she's going to die of old age. When Catwoman will arrive at the museum, she will tell Helena she has to save the Justice Society of the past. She will then throw a snow globe at Helena, and when Helena catches the globe, that will be when she is shunted back in time. Why the snow globe sends her back in time, I don't know. The snow globe, however, is a callback to the opening of the new Golden Age #1, when we saw young Helena playing in the snow at her elementary school. Snow globe is also a thematic tie-in to Jeff Johns' work on Doomsday Clock, which was itself an homage there to the snow globe scene from the Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons series, Watchmen. Now, when Helena travels back through time, we see some scenes from JSA history. First, we see the funeral of the Batman 18 years from now. Then we see the Jay Garrick Flash and his daughter Judy racing together in their costumes 1 year from now. Now, that's an important detail because previously in the New Golden Age #1, they said that Judy was Jay Garrick's daughter, born in the 40s. However, here she's a young girl racing with Jay Garrick in the near future. So that implies, of course, one, Jay Garrick, who was born in the 20s, will be around in the near future. Or, in fact, Jay Garrick may even been born slightly before the 20s. Basically, he'd be over 100 years old if he were still alive today. And yet he has a young daughter who was born 80 years ago who's going to be running around with him. So that's a good teaser. And then we see in 1976, Power Girl and Star Spangled Kid flying over the downed bodies of the Alan Scott Green Lantern, the Jay Garrick Flash, the Ted Grant Wildcat, and the Kent Nelson Dr. Fate. This itself is a big homage to All-Star Comics number 58, the issue where Power Girl and Star Spangled Kid originally joined the team. So now by this statement, they are saying that Stargirl has been around since 76. So Star Spangled Kid was originally from the 40s, skipped over 20 years, rescued in 1972 by the JLA and JSA, brought back to the present, joined the JSA in 76, and was killed by Solomon Grundy in 88 or 89. Power Girl, on the other hand, was introduced and joined the JSA both in 76. And apparently she's still around now almost 50 years later and will be around again 26 years in the future. Our final scene is the Vladimir Sokov Red Lantern in 1951. The scene from 1970, I already mentioned that. Now, I definitely don't like a Justice Society composed mostly of the team's former enemies, but then this timeline may never come to be. I also don't like that the art credits were not broken down in such a way to tell who drew what. This issue did not have as much meat on its narrative bones as the lead-in, the New Golden Age #1. By that, I mean there was not as much story, history, world building, or metaphors. But you can't really compare a 20-page story to that 36-page story plus 12 Who's Who pages. I mean, literally, that page had over double the content. So, of course, it's going to have much more content. But even still, there's just so much more going on in the New Golden Age #1. Because this issue is derived from that issue, it also doesn't really work well as a standalone issue. Certainly, as much as the setup took place in the previous comic. I did think Jeff Johns did a good job of continuing the story of the Degaton mystery, and I look forward to him unveiling more. Basically, I would say that for my brothers, what they should have done was just kind of combine the two, called it like a Justice Society Stargirl one-shot, or Justice Society / Stargirl #0, and then make it more clear that both stories were spinning out of it. That's how I feel. Okay, I'm going to do the credits, and when I come back, we're going to talk about Stargirl, The Lost Children #1. Stick around, it'll be good. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to send them to me on Twitter under the handle @JusticeTrek, or via email at thejusticetrek@gmail.com. Be sure to include the word "the" at the beginning of the email address. For research purposes, I rely heavily on dc.fandom.com, memory-alpha.fandom.com, comicvine.gamespot.com, the Grand Comics Database at comics.org, and Mike Boyle's website, Mike's Amazing World of DC Comics at dcindexes.com. The opinions expressed are solely those of the host and any participants. This podcast is not a commercial enterprise and does not make any money. All copyrights are held by their respective owners. The opening sequence was animated by Craig Smith of Phoenix Studios. The opening music is Dragon Slayer by the Mackay Symphony. All music used is either public domain and/or not protected by copyright. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Hey, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. Okay, our next issue is Stargirl, The Lost Children, #1. The roll call in order of appearance are TNT, that's Thomas N. Thomas, Dynamite, Daniel Dunbar, The Star-Spangled Kid, Sylvester Pemberton III, Stripesy, that's Pat Dugan, also known as Stripe, aka Stargirl's stepdad. And of course, we have Stargirl, Courtney Whitmore. Dragon King, real name not given. Shiv, Cindy Berman, the daughter of Dragon King. Barbara Whitmore, Stargirl's mom. Solomon Grundy. Red Arrow, Emiko Queen. Crimson Avenger, Lee Travis. The Spectre, Jim Corrigan. Wing Hao. Stargirl, The Lost Children #1 was published November 15th, 2022 with a $3.99 cover price. Lighting the Fuse was a 20-page story by Jeff Johns writer, Todd Knock pencil and ink artist, Matt Herms color artist, Rob Lee letterer, Andrew Marino editor, and Katie Kubert senior editor. In 1942, the superheroes known as TNT and Dynamite are in a car chase with a couple of bank robbers wearing fox and crow masks. TNT activates their powers by touching rings with Dynamite, and then the older hero climbs out of his car, allowing Dynamite to take over control of the vehicle. TNT then jumps onto the hood of the crook's car and destroys the engine with one explosive punch. Now, cut to 6 months ago, where the former Dynamite, Dan Dunbar, is now an old man, and he was reminiscing about his exploits with TNT. Today, Courtney Whitmore complains to her mom about being grounded for an additional week, as she had violated her previous grounding by leaving the house to look for Wing Hao, who was the missing sidekick to the World War II era superhero known as the Crimson Avenger. Later, in Courtney's room, her friend Red Arrow appears, saying she has a new lead about Wing's location. The two girls reminisce about Courtney's dream, where she was with the Crimson Avenger, while a disembodied voice said, "The childminder is coming! The lost sons, the lost daughters, the children need to be free!" The two girls then sneak out of Courtney's house and travel to Dan Dunbar's house. Dunbar has also disappeared, and while Stargirl and Red Arrow are searching the house, Red Arrow briefs her friend about the disappearance of many sidekicks of World War II era superheroes. Some of the missing sidekicks are known to Courtney, but not others, and Emiko explains that it is as if their existence has been erased. Soon after, the girls find the location of an island that Dunbar may have gone to in search of the missing sidekicks. The girls hear a glitchy voice coming over an old radio, asking Dan to find them. The girls then depart to the Arrow Cave to find a boat. We next see Dan Dunbar on a boat at night during a storm when the boat crashes on a rocky island. Dan falls into the water, but he swims down to reclaim his and TNT's power activation rings before coming up for air. He swims to shore, and when he gets there, he finds he has turned back into a child, the same age he was during World War II. Just then, someone says he shouldn't have come there, and then someone on the island screams. Okay, the primary cover was by Todd Knock, pencil, inks, and colors. Great image, lots of characters. Todd Knock is a great artist, and he doesn't get praised as often as he should. This is definitely my favorite out of all of the different covered versions to this issue. Variant cover A is a cardstock version by Crystal Kung. This is a cute, goofy image of Courtney surfing through the air on her cosmic staff near her school. Variant cover B by Mayo Sen Naito. This is also a cute anime style cover, again with Courtney surfing her cosmic staff, but this time she is with a boy, a dog, and her stepfather, Pat Dugan, wearing his stripe armor. By the way, I apologize if I mispronounced anyone's name. Definitely not trying to offend anyone. Trying to be as respectful as possible, but unfortunately, not all names are phonetic enough to be properly spoken by someone not familiar with them. Variant cover C is a virgin foil version of the primary cover by Todd Nauck. Now, this miniseries is just as much an homage to the golden age of comics as the Justice Society series. That's really why I'm covering them together. I mean, plus, of course, they're spinning out of the same comic. They are supposed to be tied together. They're literally were tied together in the story launch. A large portion of the book is told in 1940s flashbacks. Almost half the book is devoted to 1940s sidekick Dan the Dynamite. Now, the Fox and Crow masks worn by the bank robbers are actually an homage to the Fox and Crow comic books that were published by DC from the 1940s through the 1960s. Now, the comics are actually not owned by DC. They were licensed from the Columbia Screen Gems cartoons that were released in the 1940s. The comics turned out to be much more popular than the cartoons and lasted an additional 2 decades. I first heard of TNT and Dan the Dynamite when they appeared in 1978's Super Friends number 12. Dynamite would not appear again until they were used briefly in All-Star Squadron in the early 1980s, but Roy Thomas used him regularly in the late 1980s in the Young All-Star series. Given the conflicting versions of these characters in recent decades, it is probably best to assume that none of their previous adventures are part of current continuity until we are told otherwise. Basically, these days, folks, don't rely any of your narrative hopes and dreams on past stories. They may be acknowledged, they may not. And when they are acknowledged, they may only be partially the same as what you remember. Enjoy each story for what it is. So when you're reading Stargirl, The Lost Children, or the recent Justice Society of America series, appreciate the nods to the past. Don't expect them to be beholden to them, or to be beholden to them. Now, I love the special car that TNT is driving. All he has to do is press a button and a separate set of steering wheel and foot pedals pop up for Dan to use on the passenger side. Now, you think he might as well just have done like what they do for driver's ed cars, where the instructor has his own separate steering wheel and foot pedals while he's in the front passenger seat. That way, if the student driver panics and stops controlling the vehicle, the driving instructor can take over. That would have been a much simpler solution than trying to somehow conceal the steering wheel and foot pedals the whole time, and then making sure they successfully pop out when the moment is needed. Now, I don't recall seeing this energy form of TNT before. Maybe this is its first appearance, or maybe it wasn't. We don't exactly know. If I recall correctly, and maybe I don't, what they did before was they just had him glow when he was using his atomic power. Now, there is a flashback scene where Stargirl and Stripe fight Dragon King and his daughter, Cindy Berman. DC.fandom.com says that Cindy's villain name was Shiv, but it is not actually used in this issue. There is a panel where Pat tells Courtney that what she had previously been told by a time-displaced Crimson Avenger in 2021 Stargirl Spring Break Special number 1 was unreliable. How much of that was something that writer Jeff Johns had planned at the time? In other words, he planned for false information to be given? Or is he just trying to basically say, yeah, that was a year and a half ago. I've changed my mind on where I want the story to go? Could be either one. Now, Courtney's mom and Pat tell Courtney that she needs to spend some time apart from her friend. That's Red Arrow / Emiko Queen. Because Emiko is talking her into doing things like breaking curfew. When Courtney says she needs other superhero friends her own age, Barbara suggests Jakeem Thunder. Now, based on how Jakeem has been portrayed in the past, I would think he would lead Courtney even more astray than Emiko. I mean, for one thing, he was portrayed as having a using very foul language. Now, of course, in a DC mainstream comic book, they were still code approved at the time. They didn't actually use the curse words, but he just did all those symbols. I don't know that he was a particularly bad kid, or he wasn't a juvenile delinquent or anything, but he just had a foul mouth. The disembodied voice that spoke to Courtney before was the Spectre. The image on this page is an homage both to 1970's JLA number 83 and to 1972's JLA number 100. Now, oddly enough, the splash/credits page is literally in the middle of the comic. You rarely see that. I mean, usually it's the first page or near the first page, and it's more often at the very end of the comic than it is in the very middle. Now, there is a great corkboard with newspaper clippings and photos of the missing sidekicks, and some hints about who they were, where they are, or where they have been, where they may be now. Now, I like this issue much better than JSA number 1. Todd Nauck's art is detailed yet cartoony. He is an excellent storyteller, and the fact he is the sole artist on the book provides a great artistic consistency. Todd usually only does Young Justice type projects for DC, so it is great to see him back. Now, while both this series and the JSA are homages to the past, I think that the limiting the focus of this story to the new and old 1940 sidekicks will allow Jeff Johns to devote more time to fleshing out the characters here. In the JSA story, they're bipping and bopping all over the time stream, so it's really hard to get a focus. Aside from the Huntress, who will be the primary character of the story, we just aren't going to learn as much about the other characters, because we're not even going to be sure which versions of the characters we're going to be seeing. I mean, how much does the Power Woman of 26 years from now have to do with the Power Girl of 1976, even though they're supposedly the same person? Don't know. Let's see. I especially like the pathos that Johns and Nauck bring to Dan Dunbar and the teen turmoil of Courtney. So, definitely, I'm a big JSA fan. Yeah, that's why they're one of the three focuses of the show. So I'm glad to see them in new adventures. Now, personally, I like historical adventures. So if I were coming up with new stories for a team that still is supposedly founded in 1940, and using those same characters, I would just have it set in the past. I think it's unrealistic to have 100-year-old characters running around fighting crime, but I don't think I would certainly enjoy seeing more stories about the 1940s. One of the shames of the post-crisis era is there was this great big opportunity to kind of explore the blended world that we were given in the post-crisis. They did a lot of that for stories set in the present, but Roy Thomas wasn't really given much opportunity to do that. He did do about 3 and a half years worth of All-Star Squadron, Secret Origins, and Young All-Stars comics that were set in the 40s that took place post-crisis. But of course, we've had almost 5 decades of post-crisis adventure, almost 4 decades of post-crisis adventures now set in present continuity. So definitely, I just think that narrow that could be explored better. Trying to force them into modern times, I think that limits their potential, because you're constantly having to explain why these characters are still around even though they're 100 years old. Stargirl, on the other hand, is a modern character. Now, of course, you have to, continuity is just such a mess. So now, Pat, of course, he skipped over 20 years when he was with the Seven Soldiers of Victory in the past. So he would only be like 80 something, as opposed to 100 years old. But we definitely did have aged that much, because the Star Spangled Kid was his partner, and they've already established that the Star Spangled Kid was active in 76. That means his partner, Stripesy, must have returned with him. And then, of course, in the Stargirl Spring Break special, they said that the Green Arrow and Speedy of the Seven Soldiers of Victory were in the new continuity. They were the modern Green Arrow and Speedy, who were somehow sent back in time and lived there for a couple years. They even said that Speedy's time travel adventure was one of the things that led him to his heroin addiction. Now, I don't know how much of that continuity is still there. And of course, if the Green Arrow of the present was sent to the past, and then the Green Arrow of, and then all the Seven Soldiers of Victory, including the Green Arrow and Speedy, plus contemporary characters like Shining Knight, Star Spangled Kid, Stripesy, if they were returned in the 70s, and how does that explain Green Arrow being around in the present? I don't know. It hasn't been explained in depth, and that continuity may no longer be active in the wake of the Dark Crisis on Infinite Earth series. Again, best not to get bogged down in details. So those tidbits of information about Green Arrow and Speedy being back in the 40s, maybe they're still around, maybe they're not. That's the real problem with these old characters. It's just, to me, just say they were in the past. If you can either say Green Arrow, he's a current version, and you could just say there was a previous Green Arrow. You can use some other Archer, like say Alias the Spider. You could just have some other character. Like at one point they said TNT and Dan the Dynamite were in the Seven Soldiers. There's various ways to deal with it. I just don't think they've used effective ways. End of rant. So, I hope you like these stories, and I hope you like my future coverage of them. And of course, I've got many previous episodes out there. Number 15, where I did the New Golden Age number 1. Number 3, where I did the first appearance of the Justice Society in All-Star Comics number 3 from 1940. Episode 19, where I did the reverse spells of Zatanna's magic from 1978, Justice League of America number 161. And episode 20, where I covered 2022's Star Trek number 1. Coming up in our next episode, we have 2022 Star Trek number 2. And please join me for the following episode, where I will cover both 2023's Justice Society of America number 2 and 2022's Stargirl The Lost Children number 2. Hey, if you like what I'm doing, please click like, please click subscribe, and hey, keep on Justice Trekking.